Today's story is about an airport robbery where thieves broke into Miami Airport's cash warehouse in broad daylight. In just a few minutes, stole $10 million. The most shocking part was that when this gang was committing the robbery, a police patrol car was only a short distance away from the cash warehouse. Yet they had no clue about the robbery. This heist was executed so cleanly that no bullets were fired, no alarms went off, and the thieves disappeared right in front of the workers' eyes. It seemed like the perfect robbery, and these thieves might have never been caught. But because of one gang member's foolish mistake, the entire gang ended up in police hands. The story begins in April 2005, when the mastermind of this robbery, Carl Manzer, received a phone call that changed his life forever. Carl was a 32-year-old man from Cuba, living in Miami, Florida, in search of better job opportunities and a good life. Back in Cuba, he had worked in different jobs, but neither was he paid fairly for his hard work, nor did he find success. That's why he moved to Miami with big dreams, where he was living a quiet and peaceful life. The man who called Carl was a childhood friend and neighbor, Onelio Disnelia. Onelio was a security guard supervisor at the very same Miami airport warehouse where all the cash came in and was loaded onto planes. On the call, Onelio told Carl that he moved more than $100 million in cash through this warehouse every single day. This cash came from Germany's Commerzbank through Lufthansa Airlines to Miami Airport, where Onelio and his guards transferred it into a warehouse. Then the cash went for customs checks. During customs inspection, the guards carefully examined the cash bags to ensure no one had tampered with them. After that, the bags were loaded into high-security trucks and sent to Miami's Federal Reserve Branch, which was only 6 kilometers away from the airport. But in this process, Onelio noticed a weakness in security. He saw that at the cargo terminal, the guards often ignored safety protocols. For example, after moving cash in and out, they sometimes left the doors unlocked. This carelessness would cost them heavily later. In that warehouse, there was also one door that opened directly onto the road. Seeing this, Onelio got the idea for the robbery that would eventually make $10 million vanish from Miami Airport in broad daylight. However, Onelio did not want to be directly involved in the robbery. He wanted his name to remain out of it. So, he started looking for someone he could trust, someone who could carry out the robbery perfectly. That's when he thought of Carl. Onelio knew Carl badly needed money because Carl and his wife wanted to adopt a child. And in America, adoption was an expensive process. Although Carl earned enough to take care of himself and his wife, their biggest sadness was not having a child. Carl had married a woman named Cinnamon in 1992, but even after years of marriage, they couldn't have a child. That's why they decided to adopt, so they could finally experience parenthood. When Onelio told Carl about the robbery plan over the phone, Carl was full of doubt and hesitation. But because he needed money for adoption and wanted to bring happiness into his family, he agreed to the plan. Carl had no idea that this one decision was about to change his life forever. Even though Carl had never committed a crime before, he was very interested in crime shows and movies. He used to watch them carefully, learning about different crimes and the ways criminals avoided getting caught. From this, he picked up the idea that would help him execute one of America's biggest airport robberies. Carl worked as a truck driver for United Rentals, a company that moved construction machinery from one site to another. Most of his time was spent driving trucks. Although Carl found the job boring, it was enough to keep his household running. When Onelio told him about the robbery, Carl realized the plan sounded too simple, almost suspicious. But after weighing the risks, he decided he would go through with it. Carl knew he had to be careful with every single step. So, he first decided to carefully study the cargo terminal and its security system. He booked a room at the Miami Hilton Hotel right across from the airport. From his room window, he had a clear view of the cargo terminal. With the help of binoculars, Carl began observing the warehouse from his room. He wanted to see what happened there every day and what mistakes the guards made while working. From this room, he could clearly see the warehouse where all the cash was kept. This was where Carl began to build his plan. Gradually, he started to understand the guards' timings, their working patterns, and the security procedures. This brought him closer and closer to carrying out the robbery. Just a few days after Carl had started watching the warehouse, construction began nearby. Some trucks were parked near the warehouse, which blocked Carl's view from the east side. Now, he could only partially see what was happening inside. So within the same week, he rented another room on the west side of the hotel, which gave him a much better view of the warehouse and the guards. For the next several weeks, Carl observed every single activity happening at the warehouse. But then, a new doubt began troubling him. Carl started to think, what if these bags didn't really contain cash? What if it was just a trick and the real money was stored somewhere else? To be sure, Carl went to the warehouse twice pretending to ask for a job. What he saw there left him stunned. The warehouse was filled with bags completely packed with cash. Now Carl was convinced that everything O'Neillio had told him was true. His determination to carry out the robbery became stronger than ever. Next, Carl began looking for a spot near the warehouse where there were no CCTV cameras and where he could hide the cars they would use for the escape. Carl had already stolen 2 cars earlier from Jacksonville, Florida, with the help of a friend. He brought these cars to Miami and hid them in a warehouse so they could use them when the time came. One by one, Carl lined up every step of his plan. Carl was now convinced that the day was not far when he would have enough money to live his entire life in luxury. By keeping a close watch on the warehouse, he had confirmed there was a huge amount of cash inside. He had already arranged cars for the escape. But one very important task still remained. He needed to build a team who could help him in the robbery. So Carl started gathering his own gang, step by step. He included only those people who had some criminal background and who had been involved in robberies before. The first person he brought into the gang was his own uncle, Conrado Pereira. Conrado had a criminal record, but he wanted to use the robbery money to start fresh and open a legal business. So, he agreed to join Carl's plan. The second person Carl added was Jeffrey Boatwright, his brother-in-law. Jeffrey was also used to driving trucks. Later, it was this very man because of whom the entire gang would be caught. The third and last member to join the gang was Roberto Perez, who worked with Carl. Roberto was struggling financially, so he agreed to help. Meanwhile, Carl's wife Cinnamon became pregnant. Carl didn't want to shock or stress her, so he kept the robbery plan hidden from her. Originally, Carl was going to do the robbery for adoption money. But now, with his wife pregnant, he was happy and even thought about not going ahead with it. However, just 2 months before the robbery, something happened that turned his entire world upside down. Cinnamon was admitted to the hospital because of high blood pressure. During the pregnancy complications, they lost their unborn child. This tragedy shook Carl and his wife completely. Carl fell into deep sadness, but at the same time, anger started building inside him. Anger that pushed him towards a robbery. Now, this robbery wasn't just about money. Carl believed that with the robbery money, he would adopt a child and buy every happiness his family needed. Finally, the day of the robbery arrived. On November 6th, 2005, O'Neillio called Carl to tell him that the Lufthansa Airlines plane carrying the cash had landed and the bags full of money were ready to be moved. Hearing this, Carl quickly pulled out the cars he had hidden. He and his gang got inside, fully ready to carry out the airport robbery. Meanwhile, O'Neillio and his guards took the cash for inspection. After inspection, the bags were usually left inside the warehouse, where the guards often worked carelessly and where the gate was left open. This was the perfect opportunity for Carl and his gang to strike. Carl divided the tasks among his gang members. Roberto's job was to stand outside and keep watch for any danger. Jeffrey, Carl's brother-in-law, was assigned to drive the car and wait outside the warehouse to pick them up. Carl and his uncle Pereira would go inside the warehouse, carry out the robbery, and escape with the bags of cash. Even though Carl had made perfect plans, he was still nervous. It was his first robbery, and he couldn't stop worrying that one mistake could land him in jail. As Carl and his gang were approaching the warehouse, something happened that almost froze them in place. Carl saw customs police cars with sirens blaring overtake them and head straight toward the warehouse, the same warehouse where they were planning the robbery. Seeing this, Jeffrey slowed down the car. They pulled over to the side and waited to see what was happening. The presence of the police terrified the gang. They started shaking in fear and even thought about canceling the robbery. But Carl was not the type to give up easily. He told his gang to stick to the plan. He was determined that the robbery would happen that very day. Ironically, what they thought would be a problem, the presence of the police, ended up making their work easier. How? You will see in the next part of the story. By now, it was already 3 p.m. After the inspection, the cash bags were being loaded onto the trucks. This was Carl's perfect chance. The police cars, after stopping near the warehouse with sirens, soon left again for patrolling. The guards inside felt relaxed, thinking there was no threat anymore. This was the exact moment Carl and his uncle Pereira had been waiting for. They put on masks to hide their faces, got out of the car, and walked straight toward the warehouse. The warehouse door was wide open, making it easy for them to enter. Inside, the site was exactly as Onelio had described. All around the warehouse, stacks of cash were packed inside plastic bags. Carl and Pereira's eyes lit up. Near the entrance, a group of guards, including Onelio, were busy sorting the cash bags to load them into different trucks. Onelio had deliberately kept the guards busy at this time, so they would be distracted, allowing Carl and Pereira to slip inside easily. At that moment, there were 44 bags in the warehouse. Each bag contained $2 million. That meant the total cash inside was $88 million. Seeing this, Carl and Pereira immediately pulled out their guns and shouted loudly, ordering the guards to drop their weapons, raise their hands, and kneel on the ground. Once Carl was sure the guards had surrendered, he and Pereira quickly selected 6 bags as their target. They carried those bags to the warehouse door. Outside, Jeffrey drove the car right up to the entrance. Carl and Pereira started loading the bags quickly into the car. But in their rush, one bag slipped from their hands and fell. Carl knew if he went back to pick it up, he might get caught. So they left it behind and escaped with 5 bags. In the end, they managed to get away with $10 million. The entire robbery happened without a single gunshot fired, and no one was injured. The heist was pulled off cleanly and smoothly. But soon after, things started to happen that would lead to each and every one of these thieves falling into police hands. After the robbery, Carl and his gang drove to a pre-decided location. There, they began transferring the money. They emptied the stolen bags and repacked all the cash into plastic bags. Carl carefully checked each stolen bag, making sure no tracking devices were hidden inside. He feared the police might use such devices to find them. Luckily, no tracking devices were found. Once the cash was repacked, they loaded it into Carl's personal car. They drove the car about 8 kilometers away and parked it in a deserted spot. Meanwhile, Jeffrey set fire to both stolen cars used in the robbery, destroying the evidence. Carl had seen in crime shows that criminals were often caught because of their DNA or fingerprints. That's why he ordered Jeffrey to burn both cars, so that their fingerprints and DNA would not fall into the hands of forensics. Meanwhile, the guards in the warehouse informed the FBI about the robbery. Soon after, the FBI announced a reward for anyone who could help identify the thieves. They promised a big prize for anyone who revealed their names. Because of this, the danger of Carl and his gang being caught grew stronger. Carl and his gang had now reached their safe house with all the stolen cash. There, they began counting the money and dividing it among themselves. Since the entire plan was Carl's idea, the largest share of the loot went to him, for $1 million. The remaining $6 million was divided among the other 3 members. Carl himself was shocked at how much money they had managed to steal in just a few minutes. It was hard for anyone to believe. After dividing the shares, Carl warned everyone not to spend large amounts of money in one place. He told them to spend carefully so no one would suspect them. Only a few hours after the robbery, the news broke on every TV channel, but no one knew who was behind it. At home, Carl's wife Cinnamon found out that he was responsible for the robbery. She was deeply shocked. She couldn't believe Carl was capable of something like this. Although Carl was now a millionaire, he did not want anyone's suspicion to fall on him. So, he continued living life just as before. Carl hid the money inside PVC pipes and the water tank in his house. He decided to wait until the case went cold before spending it. Every day, he still went to his truck driving job. His wife Cinnamon worked as a receptionist at a magazine office. This way, nobody could even imagine that they had so much hidden money. Despite all these precautions, Carl had no idea that his gang's downfall would begin because of his brother-in-law Jeffrey's foolishness. While the other gang members followed Carl's advice, Jeffrey kept making mistake after mistake. He was spending the money recklessly on drugs, alcohol, and women. Seeing this, Carl became worried that they would all be caught because of Jeffrey. He tried to explain to him that he should spend the money carefully. Carl reminded him that the money was enough to last 2 or 3 years, but since the case was still fresh, they needed to stay low. Carl feared not only being caught by the police, but also that criminal gangs might kidnap them for ransom. Sadly, this fear turned out to be true. Even after Carl's warnings, Jeffrey didn't listen. He continued hiding in hotel rooms, wasting money on drugs and alcohol. When Carl found out his location, he grabbed a baseball bat and stormed into a Miami hotel to confront him. But when he entered the room, he saw Jeffrey completely drunk, with 2 women who were also intoxicated. Carl angrily threatened him, saying if he didn't listen, he would burn all his money. Jeffrey then promised Carl that he would leave Miami for 2 years. But this was a promise he never kept. Carl's fears soon came true. One evening in December, as Jeffrey was leaving a club, a criminal gang kidnapped him. They demanded $1 million ransom from Carl in exchange for Jeffrey's release. Carl paid them, and Jeffrey was freed. But instead of changing, he went straight back to his old habits of drugs and parties. The FBI officer investigating the robbery was named Alex Perez. During his investigation, he began to suspect that the warehouse supervisor, Onelio, might also be involved. But since he had no solid proof, he couldn't act yet. Meanwhile, the Miami Airport Authority announced a reward of $100,000 for anyone who provided information about the robbery. This trick worked. The person who came forward was none other than Carl's own friend. He had once overheard Carl's uncle talking about the robbery. He gave the FBI a list of 4 suspects, including Carl. The FBI then began tapping the suspects' phones to listen to their conversations. But for a long time, they found nothing useful. By now, more than 3 months had passed since the robbery, and this was the beginning of the gang's downfall. The same kidnappers who had abducted Jeffrey before came back and kidnapped him again. Once again, they demanded $1 million ransom from Carl, which he paid. This time, however, they tortured Jeffrey badly, even pulling out his fingernails. But even this didn't stop him. After being released, he continued wasting money on drugs and parties. Just days later, on February 16th, 2006, Jeffrey went back to the Gold Rush Club, the same club from where he had been kidnapped earlier. There, 2 women lured him into the parking lot, where an SUV was waiting. As soon as Jeffrey got inside, 2 men followed, hitting him on the head with a gun and blindfolding him. Jeffrey passed out. 12 hours later, Carl received another ransom call. But this time, one of the kidnappers was Carl's own friend, Robert Salty. The kidnappers demanded $500,000, threatening to kill Jeffrey if the ransom wasn't paid. By now, Carl was tired of Jeffrey's recklessness. He had already paid $2 million in ransom before. This time, he refused. He told the kidnappers he wouldn't pay a single dollar, and that they could kill Jeffrey if they wanted. When the kidnappers didn't get money from Carl, they called Carl's wife instead. They threatened to kill her brother if the ransom wasn't paid. Hearing this, Cinnamon immediately called Carl, begging him to save her brother's life. Since Carl loved his wife deeply, he agreed to pay for Jeffrey's release again. But something unexpected happened this time. Because the FBI had been tapping their phones all along, they already knew about Jeffrey's kidnapping. In fact, they had already rescued him once before. So, one night, while Carl was driving his wife to the doctor, FBI agents in plain clothes began following him. At first, Carl thought the kidnappers were after him. But soon, the FBI arrested him and took him to the Miami headquarters for questioning. Carl was stunned when he realized the FBI already knew about Jeffrey's kidnapping. They had arrested 5 kidnappers, including his friend Robert Salty, Michael Sunfield, and Gulmar Delgado, who were sentenced to 7 to 15 years. The other 2, Manuel Palacio and Michael Hernaz, received 26 and 34 years. With the kidnappers in custody, The FBI now focused on catching the airport robbers. Since they had been tapping calls, they soon arrested O'Neillio, the warehouse supervisor, while he was on his way home. From his car, they recovered about $35,000. Under pressure, O'Neillio confessed everything and revealed that Carl was the mastermind of the entire heist. After this, the FBI searched Carl's car and found $80,000 in cash. When they checked the serial numbers, they matched the stolen airport cash. With Carl and O'Neillio already in custody, it didn't take long for the FBI to arrest the remaining gang members. Their trial began soon after. The court found them guilty of armed robbery and sentenced them to different terms. O'Neillio was given 16 years, but was released after 14 years. Jeffrey was sentenced to 17 years, but due to poor health, he was released after 11 years. Sadly, he died shortly after his release. Carl's wife Cinnamon was sentenced to 3 years for hiding the truth from the FBI. Carl's uncle Pereira received 16 years, but he escaped from prison. When he was caught again 4 years later, his sentence was extended by another 11 years. And finally, Carl, the mastermind, was sentenced to 17 years. But on April 1st, 2016, after 10 years, he was released on parole for cooperating with the FBI in recovering the stolen money. When Carl came out of prison, all he had left was regret. His mother had died of a heart attack after hearing about his arrest. One of his brothers fell seriously ill. The other brother lost both his legs in an accident, and his wife divorced him. Carl's dream of becoming a father never came true. After completing his sentence, he returned to his old job as a truck driver in Miami. He lived with his new girlfriend and her daughter, trying to rebuild a simple life.